I think, yeah, being like a scientist on yourself and figuring out, what your patterns are, et cetera, and kind of learning from yourself, and not in a limiting way, but knowing what situations you'd like to put yourself into and what would make you happy ultimately. I think you already know a lot about yourself. You just kind of need to access that. And I think that, for me is something I've worked on. I continue to work on.
This is Intentionally Ever After. Join intentional lifestyle coach Joe Bukartek for a series of personal conversations and coaching sessions with various people about how living with intention shows up for them.
Greetings, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Intentionally Ever After. Today, I get to chat with my good longtime friend, Dr. Neil Bajpayee. Neil, welcome.
Thank you, Joe. Are we going to be talking like this for this session?
You should be using your radio voice. So start to integrate that in, if you will.
I have not prepared.
Will you kindly introduce yourself, please?
Absolutely. My name is Neil Bajpayee. I'm originally from Pennsylvania. I live in California. I'm a father, a husband, a son, a brother. I work in the biotechnology industry for the last 10 years. I got my Ph.D. in medical research, and I'm a person that I think is very similar to Joe Bukartek.
Ooh, yeah.
Let's dive deeper into that.
Yeah. I so want to know, I assume, first of all, that success in your career stemmed largely from your AP chemistry study partners. Is that fair to say?
Oh, could be. Yeah, it could be. I mean, that was a topic that I gravitated towards. Chemistry was straightforward. Was I your partner? As I recall, it was somebody else.
Well, certainly, as part of our study group, you were a member of that. Yeah.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Yeah.
And I use the term study group loosely.
A larger study group. Yeah. No, I actually think we had an excellent high school education, and we had a lot of great people that kind of helped launch us. And if you actually look back at our high school class, a lot of very successful people came out of it.
That's true.
Academically and law and other professions. So I think we were in a good place.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think even if you check this podcast history, you might find another member of our graduating class as well, at least one, depending on when this gets published.
Oh, very interesting. Stay tuned.
Yeah, so I'll leave that right there for you. Now, I can't leave alone what you just said, how you feel like you're very similar to yours truly. What do you mean by that?
I think just in a mindset, in finding what we are interested in, and I always thought there was some similarities, and that's why when you moved to our town, our tiny little town, from all your travels, I thought, okay, here's a person who is kind of has a mindset wherein they're accepting, open of other people. They are someone who is looking to have a good time, but also very kind of motivated in other ways. And so I thought, okay, here's a person that is very similar to me. That's what I thought.
Cool. I would say I thought similar things about you as well, but obviously a very different lens.
Is that an accurate representation?
Well, it's certainly, I liked hearing the things that you had to say about me. So yeah, I'm willing to embrace that 100%. Yeah.
Oh, good.
It's hard for me to remember exactly how I actually was in high school without thinking of how I think I wanted to be, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Right?
Maybe we're both in some sort of transition at that time.
Well, certainly,
yeah.
Right? Transition into the heart of the heaviness of puberty, right? Is that what it is?
No, not just physically and hormonally, but I think just high school in general is you're working on an identity in some ways, and I think that's with me, where I was and my family, I was always worried, okay, what label would be attached to me? And then I thought, oh, here's a person. It's really hard to put a label on them. It's like, okay, that's nice. Are you the French guy? Are you the guy from Belgium? Are you the guy with the fancy chocolates at his house? It's hard to define.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that I might have been all those things, first of all, but.
Oh, there were many more things I could have gone on. Just like there are too many labels to bucket you.
I appreciate that. But what that makes me think of is the fact that, you referenced the fact that I moved into that town after previously being elsewhere.
Yes.
But you were born and raised in that town, correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
So how does that idea of identity then, you mentioned you felt like you were in a transition at that period. How do you get to that point and decide, I'm in a place where I get to decide who I want to be?
I mean,
what's the impetus for change, do you think, or consideration?
I think everyone goes through this in some way, and they feel like they probably have little control over it because I think those labels are often put by others, and you either accept them or try and reject them. And in this case, I didn't really feel I had any pressure, to accept some label or thought of who's Neil Bajpayee. I think I just started to gravitate towards the things that I liked and I was good at. And I think that helped me, kind of choose what I wanted to do next, kind of not be too concerned about it, about, what label, people put on me.
What's an example of a label you feel like was put on you?
It's not like a, formal, stamp that we get, walking into the cafeteria or something. But I think, in each, at that time, there's cliques. There's groups of people who kind of come together. There's usually some commonality to them. There may be a certain academic standing. There may be certain, athletes or activities that they do, or there may be some general interest or, things that they do outside of school that they gravitated towards. So for me, there wasn't really anything like, oh, well, what do? I do these extracurricular activities. I'm okay at school. So what is it what label will be put on me? And I was always curious what that would be. It wasn't something that I thought was an issue, but it was just something that, okay, I do have some say in this since there's no pressure. But then I thought, the more I thought about it, the more I thought it's a waste of time because that can change so quickly. Your identity of, based on those labels can change very quickly.
Yeah. So it didn't sound like you felt too much pressure. You didn't feel limited by labeling.
Not at all. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's something I actually spent time exploring early on. I used to like reading biographies. I think actually early on, starting in high school, we were forced to read a few biographies, but, following that, I was like, wow, you can get a lot of experience from, reading a biography more so than watching movies and watching TV, which I much would have preferred, I'm sure. But then, you start to read and, what you literally, don't judge a book by its cover. Once you start to read the stories of extraordinary, complex lives, you realize it's very hard to label people. Maybe you can do it at certain phases of their life, as in one label being, oh, this person's a jerk, or this person was amazing. They weren't amazing their whole life. They weren't a jerk their whole life. It's incredibly complex. So I just, after reading all of those, I'm like, well, there's no real need to do this. And I think when you meet people, when you introduce yourself, I think there's kind of at least maybe in the professional world, in other areas, there's a tendency, we have to make a strong impression. But I think, that there shouldn't be too much pressure in that because, yes, it's great to make a good impression, but it doesn't have to be the lasting impression of you, which is a very complex person at the end of the day.
What's the impression that you hope to leave people with when you make an introduction for the first time today?
Oh, I would like to say nice person. And I would be labeled probably with hopefully the majority of the population, I would think. But that's fine. I don't need to leave some mark that, oh yeah, I remember that guy. And, I want them to to think about me when they, go to sleep. No, that's not my concern. I think in general, a goal, with interacting with people I, don't know, is to just be a good person.
So maybe this gets into the baseline question, which is, what does it mean to Dr. Emil Bajpayee to live intentionally?
I think it means to live consciously, and that means having awareness, both of, yourself, the situation, and what your, be careful here, goals or objectives are. I think it just requires a certain level of consciousness to live intentionally. And I think intentionally doesn't have to be something that's positive. You may be wanting to do something that is probably not best for you in the long run, but if you can do that consciously, you're living intentionally. So to me, I think the word intention typically I would use when I don't intend to do something. Oh, that wasn't intentional. And then you think about, why did that occur, even though it wasn't intentional? So I think of it more as, maybe it's a broader word, just, living consciously.
Yeah. I've been thinking recently about intentionality being kind of on a spectrum. It's not maybe not living with a lack of intentionality or something being unintentional, but maybe things being less intentional or more intentional. So thinking about it through that lens, what does it look like for you when you're living with more intentionality?
Oh, God, that's such a tough question. Now, so I'm dialing up the intentionality. I think when it's more intentional, it's extremely natural. It is not as active a process where you're thinking about it. I think when there's something wherein you're acting with more intention, there was no internal debate. And look, from the time I was very small to this day, when I'm making a big decision, or even a purchase for that matter, I just perseverate on the issue. The issue is like a Rubik's Cube. It rolls over in my mind, explore every square, and I spend a lot of time until I think I can gather no more information. And then typically I need some time, what I call sleep on it or noodle on it, and ultimately it comes to me. Then I rely on my gut feeling. So I'm as quantitative as I can, and then once you run out of information, you have to make a decision. I think if something's extremely intentional, then I absolutely have no need to do that process, no need to study or perseverate on the issue. And I can just say, without a doubt, here's what I want to do.
Is that because it connects with your gut? Is that what you're saying?
No, in that situation, it kind of connects with my values. And it could be, coming from my gut, right? Just being, okay, that's what I want to do.
Yeah, but by your explanation of it, it sounds like there's, regardless of how much data collection you're doing, in the end, there's always a level of gut reaction to it. Is that fair to say?
Often, but sometimes, the data is sufficient to make the decision for you. That's what I mean. There are certain decisions in our life where, we don't know what the outcome will be. Right? We can't predict the future, nor would we want to. Right. And I think in those cases, the gut decision, is very important.
What's an example of you living consciously, present day?
I think that means, wherever you are, and this relates to the word of, consciousness these days, being, the word is, being present. What that actually means and how to do that, I think can be very difficult because we're attached to devices, because we have, everyone's much more productive than they were decades ago. There's a lot of things just running through our head. And I think that literally means to be conscious is to be aware and present, with reality. And reality, I mean, we're speaking generally, but, for a decision, it could be focus on that decision, focused on, what information is being given to you at that time, and not focused on, what you thought, this decision should be like, what you thought you would end up doing what others may label you and want you to do, things like that. So I think you kind of clean the window and you make decision presently based on information and gut feeling, but also knowing both yourself and what is expected of you. You can make those. You can be present. You can make those decisions consciously by kind of reducing that, any of those, feelings that may cloud your, your judgment or your decisions.
Sure, which happened to all of us.
Yeah. It's a daily occurrence, and it could happen at the smallest level. What coffee should I order here? Or
right.
Where do I want to live? What do I want to do with my career?
So take me inside a day in the life, then, if you would, in your finest hour. We don't have to, address how frequently you feel like you're living consciously or with intention, but in your finest hour, in your Instagrammable moment, what does intentionality look like? What does living pretty present look like for you?
I would think it would be, I'm pretty relaxed at that point. If I can make a decision in a relaxed state, and I feel like there's no, external pressures on me, and there may actually be, consequences of a decision that I'm going to make. But I think if you have the chance to just relax and think about it and zoom out, this is something I've always done in my life.
Yeah,
you can be in professional decisions, you can be in negotiations, in your personal life, you can be dealing with things. If you zoom out and think about, okay, how big is this issue really?
Yeah,
I think that's one of the best things you can do, and it kind of takes away that pressure, even though there may be strings attached to a certain decision. And that zooming out process has been, I feel I've refined it, so I can zoom out and think about what the impacts of this are over the arc of my life, and generally, any decision, most decisions I've made in my life, they will not have an impact either on me or on my family or on, the arc of humankind. It just won't.
So you're saying the stakes aren't that high?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. And so at this point, I am trying to be cognizant of our listeners who are screaming at their speaker saying he is giving very general responses. Why won't he answer your question of specificity? And I have to tell him, I don't know. He's making really good points.
I just don't think your question is that specific.
How might I have asked it better to get a very specific example from you and what it looks like for you?
In my best moment, what does intentionality look like? I think it's a general question. So in my best moment, what would be my best moment?
It doesn't have to be your best moment. What's an example from the past week where you felt like, yeah, this is how I want it to be?
I feel like most of the week was like that, so I have a hard time taking it.
So it sounds like you have a lot of choices to choose from. How lucky for us. Kindly share 1 to 17 of them.
Yeah. So let's talk about, I think generally I was, working on, I have a 16-month-old now. He is getting very heavy for me, and I would like him to be able to crawl into our car. So we have a car that it wouldn't work. So I'm like, we're going to go get a new car. And one of the funniest things that I've ever seen was him at a car dealership, because he's obsessed with vehicles and he saw all these cars of different colors and he was just running everywhere. So that kind of put and lightened the situation of, going there and selecting a car. And I had already researched, I knew what I wanted to do. And when we get there, we test drive the car, we look at it, we're I think ready to go. But then we realize, okay, we're going to be in a similar situation as we were last time, because the clearance, the dimensions that we thought that he could just kind of walk into this car, it was still like a challenge. And it would be it was very obvious. It's something we missed, right? Something that step is just too high. And also the space that it provided wasn't there. So we just made a decision, okay, and then you get pressure from a salesperson or whatever, why don't you look at all these other cars? And for me, I'm not going to make any such decision like that without doing a lot of research. So I said, let's go. And it was just so simple. It was just a very natural decision. Also, it helped he was going nuts there. But it was such a natural decision where in the past I would have said, yeah, let me look at this car and that car. And knowing that I wouldn't have, spent much, spent time there to actually purchase the car. I would have just gone through the motions, felt the obligation, with the salesperson to do that. But now I know, without doing my research, without planning, I'm not going to do anything. So I said, let's save both of our time. I'll look at your inventory, come back to you. And it was just very natural. And I think in the past, I would have been like, in the far past, I would have been like, oh, this is stressing me out in some way. Just to be there, to speak with like a pushy salesman, et cetera. But it didn't. It's just, I know what I want. If I can't get it, we'll move on. And I think that was just something that comes with maturity. It's not something I necessarily practiced, but it's something that it was pretty straightforward. I don't think that was the best example, but what you asked,
au contraire,
it was an example.
I appreciate you giving that example. 6 more, please.
No, I don't have any. But let me talk to you about something else. Okay, the zooming out process.
Yes.
And I was thinking about it as I was saying it. Like, why do I always do that, right? Because I think at first I used to think, okay, I do this to kind of avoid like making a decision or kind of scrutinizing it. Then the more I thought about it, and the more it was adaptive for me, I just thought, okay, there has to be something to this. And I think it just comes from when I was a kid, losing my father early. That kind of changed the arc of your life and what I've always thought about. And I've studied the impact of that event over my life, not in a morbid or sad way, not in a way where I think I'm, I feel I'm a victim. It's more like, okay, how did that change things? And I think the biggest thing for me was, yes, that was an event that nobody had any control over, that kind of dictated kind of probably what kind of person I'd be, where we would live, probably where I'd end up going to school, everything. Because he was, the main breadwinner in our family, et cetera. And that changed so much. And I think about, okay, what happened to that other path where that didn't happen? And so I always zoom out and be like, okay, what impact is this going to have? Is this going to have some multi-decade gravitating effect? And I think, no, most of the decisions I make don't have that. And I always look for people who've also had like a similar experience. And there's like, TV personalities that have, or once Anderson Cooper. And you think about what he says, he's like, oh, I would have been a completely different person. That was, very impactful to me in my life. And I kind of relate with that, but, in the same way, it didn't hold them back in any way. I think it's just everything's now different. The trajectory is now different. Either what you're going towards or, as far as a profession or even your personality, what you would be like. I think that event, experiencing death early, kind of puts it in your mind. When I say conscious, I think of things like that. I'm like, okay, terrible things can happen, but at the same time, it's inevitable and doesn't have to be sad or morbid or anything. We don't have much time. That's what I always think. I'm like, okay, let's get on with it. And I think that's like one of the most powerful things I can like tap into whenever I find myself in a difficult situation.
Yeah, that's some really powerful perspective, and one that, to your point, you've had for quite some time.
Yeah.
Is that the takeaway you've always had from it, do you think? Or it's certainly what it's grown into at this point, as far as perspective? Like, we don't have much, we don't know how much time we have.
Yeah.
We better get on with it.
Yeah, I think it also comes, absolutely. That's the biggest thing. There's, for all of us, that's the truth. There's an end to all of this. And one time, and this reminds me, when I moved out to California to do grad school, I thought of, okay, I'm going home like once a year at this point, sometimes twice a year. And then I calculated, okay, if I go home twice a year, to see my mother and my family, and then based on everyone's life expectancy, I'll only see them X amount of times. It was like some number under 50. And I was like, oh my God, that's horrible, right? And you start thinking like that. I'm not thinking oh, this is sad. This is oh, I need to change this because that's not enough based on how much I want to, see my family and connect with them. So, those are things that you can think of. And when you wake up and you say, hey, I'm healthy, I'm relatively, safe, then I think you should use that day. That's a gift, because you don't know what's going to happen later. And our time here is finite. So the best you can use that time to accomplish whatever you want. That's something I think that people should think about. I think they should it shouldn't be like constantly in your mind. It should be like you think about, hey, I'm safe, I'm healthy. What do I want to accomplish today? And I think that should be the outlook. That can help folks. At least it's helped me. And so I think that's what kind of has gotten me to this point, despite certain challenges in my life. And I have to say, that was an event that happened, but the community, my family, I was well supported. I can't say that that affected me in a way that I was put in an unsafe situation or, I felt alone. That was never the case. But it does make you realize that, our time here is finite.
Yeah, it's an interesting topic because, well, for many reasons. One of them maybe being that something will happen in your life within or outside of your control to drastically shift the trajectory, right, of your life.
Mm-hmm.
But as you're also talking, you're also identifying, your ability to impact what you do on a day-to-day and how you, impact what you do within that set of parameters. And so when you bring it up that way, it doesn't sound very limiting at all.
Yeah.
Is that how you see it, as being unlimited or limitless?
Yeah, in a way, it's limitless. Obviously, there's other limits that I have, but I think it's definitely something you can tap into, and I just think it makes you kind of realize how great it is, how grateful you are of certain things that, even though one issue or decisions or life's general challenges can occupy your mind. Once you kind of do that, zoom out, at least is what works for me, is okay, it minimizes it in a way. And it says to me, okay, you can do this, right? And in certain cases, you have to do this. So the idea of get on with it isn't something that I kind of tried to tap into as much as I can.
Yeah. So the experience of losing your father at an early age is obviously something outside of your control.
Yeah.
What's an example of something that you have done consciously, a decision you've made consciously that has made a significant impact that maybe has changed the trajectory of your life?
Oh, that's a great one. I think, growing up, since he did pass away, then I thought about, okay, well, what do I want to do with my life? So it put our family in a different financial position. I always felt I wish I, could have more stuff. I knew I would always go to college because it was basically mandatory in my family. But after college, I'm okay, what do I want to do? So I decided I'm going to go to grad school. I'm going to do 6 years and get, do research and be paid very little. And it really fulfilled the objective of being able to afford more things, enter the middle class, etc. But I knew long term, I couldn't base decisions just on what I immediately wanted financially. I played the long game. And to me, one, it was interest in that field. And I thought, okay, so long as I'm interested in this field, this is a good decision. Two, so long as I can get by and fulfill my obligations, with whatever I'm paid, then I'll be okay. I'm postponing retirement, financial planning, maybe even marriage, because I should probably have a job at that point. But that was a decision that I thought I easily could have gone the other way and said, hey, I just want to make money now and I'm just going to focus on that. And I think I didn't make the decision. That wasn't something that I came up with. I think, just reading and talking to people, they say, think about your life, particularly when you're in your early 20s, think about it and think about the long game. Don't think about, by the time I'm 25, I want a new car. That's not going to keep you happy long term. The point was focus on what you want to do and, put everything you have into it. And I took that to heart and, decided to go to grad school right after college. And I think it was a great decision. There was no, I look back and I say, yes, it would have been nice to have more things. It would have made life easier a little bit. But at the same time, I can't think about what those things are now. I can't even remember. It's just the right decision in my mind.
What challenge? I mean, it's really nice to be quote unquote on the other side of it, right? And that confidence is there.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, well, yeah, I'm really glad I did that. What along the way, and maybe you alluded to it with, it would have been nice to have some things, would have made life a little easier. So maybe what challenged that along the way? What was there anything that potentially caused you to take a left turn or a U-turn and be like, no, I was wrong?
Oh, I mean, there are times in grad school where you think about, okay, where's this going to go? Because it's a hyper-focused program where you're doing research where no one else is doing research generally. And that's number one, what appealed to me. But two, you think about, okay, what am I going to do after this? We're often thinking about, what's next? Am I going to be is there a job, for me to do research in this very, limited area? Or, just to continue on the path of, becoming a professor, which is long and, challenging nowadays, just due to the kind of the sheer dearth of professorship positions out there. I thought, okay, what am I going to do? And I'm like, was this the right call? I did question it. It was not like it was, I'm on the other side, like you said, and it's clear now, like that was the right decision to go. But there were times where I'm like, hey, maybe I should have gotten that job. Maybe I should be working like most of my other friends from college. And I think that kind of pulled at me. It said, okay, well, yeah, you're taking a bit of a risk here. But in my mind, the outcome and the potential outcome, I should say, the potential outcome of, ending up in staying in the field that I wanted, having an advanced degree, being someone who kind of has that credential and then can, have access to other types of jobs. And that was in my mind. And then the other thing I knew is, the field of biotech moves very quickly. And that in that, there are new technologies, there's new ways of financing things, there's new ways of doing development. And the jobs that I'm looking at now, I'm just being a little narrow focused about it. Like, it's not just going to be, the area I'm doing research where I need to find a position. There'll be ways to branch out. But that was tough. I think there were a few years in there where I'm like, oh, what's next? And until you accomplish something in grad school, it's hard to say. You're doing your restart. And the biggest fear for me, at that time was, okay, I dropped out of this program and then I basically am in the same position when I graduated college. I would hate to go backwards. That would eat at me because it was inefficient. I wasted time. And so that would have been something that I would have found really challenging. But yeah, there were a few years there that it's just challenging. It's a grind in graduate school. And the more you can, kind of focus on, where you ultimately want to go, I think that kind of, helped serve me. But without a doubt, it was not easy.
So is life easy now?
Easier in that I don't have to make such major life decisions. Obviously there's career decisions to make, there's like family decisions to make, but, I feel pretty stable with those in that regard. And I kind of know, in what areas I have interest in, what, things I want to see, happen with my family, et cetera. So I'm just like, yeah, it is much easier. It gets better.
That's pretty reassuring for folks who may be similar to you or who are at that stage now, maybe trying to figure out, what do I do? Do I go for the quick fix right now or the solid foundation? Knowing that at least one person out there feels like life is in fact easier. By doing things maybe less easily the first time.
And I'm very impressed by people that can pull off the mid-career pivot, who can, say, no, I want to try something new. There's certainly risk to that. But I think even when you're in college, yes, you have youth on your side, but if you have that interest in it and you have, some passion, let's say, I think you should go for it. because you're probably going to be successful if you have those two things. Oh, obviously some aptitude. Like I'm not going to, switch now and become a neurosurgeon. That ship has sailed. But there are opportunities that people have, and they should, if they really have the interest in it, and they should just take the first step, and that'll tell them. How committed they are to it. Take whatever exam, take that first course, and do whatever. Pay that first tuition fee, whatever it is. Do that, and it'll show how committed you are. Because you're a little hesitant and you postpone it, it would tell me that, okay, maybe you don't want this that much.
Interesting. Yeah, you took that a little bit differently than I thought you were going. To me, it sounded like, you got to create a data point to see if you really like it. But it sounded like what you're saying at the end there was, if there's hesitation, then maybe that's not it for you. Help me discern the difference between a healthy level of fear and risk taking versus trust your gut.
Well, yeah, it's a little of both, right? A data point can only serve so much, but serve you so much. But I think the way I'm thinking about this is someone once told me, you're having a tough time making a decision, flip a coin. And the point was not to make you decide, is to make you react to the outcome. And then you react to, one of two choices. And you're like, oh no, not this one. Yeah. And obviously suddenly, what is it about that? You have coin flip. So where it's taken out of your control, that pressure is taken off. And suddenly you're saying, okay, now I can access my feelings about this.
Gotcha.
And I think you really can't do that when you're like consumed with making the decision. I think it has to be, kind of you just focusing on the issue rather than, what impact will this have on all the other aspects of my life? Or, will this take me backwards in some way? That's a lot of baggage. If you can clear that and access your feelings about it, then I think then you're making a clearer choice.
Love it. Okay. That makes a lot of sense to me, right? Figure out a way to clear the noise and figure out how you actually feel about something.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
I always thought you were pretty good at that. Yeah.
What do you mean?
I think when you're like, what you wanted to major in, or, kind of what even you wanted to do that weekend. You were like, you could say, here's what happened either this week or I don't want to do. You were just pretty decisive about certain things. And I thought it was like, okay, because you're not coming in with like, a lot of let's say, not clinical anxiety, but like anxiety or fear or like kind of baggage with an issue. You would just be, okay, here's what I want to do.
Cool.
At least it appeared that way. So good job.
Yeah, I fooled you at least. That's one person I got. Well, this makes me think of another question is, who is someone you admire and what do you admire about them?
Oh, that's a great question. There's a lot of folks I admire. I generally think anyone with like, real expertise in an area. And so one time, this could be, one time, like I thought, okay, I have an issue with a bent gear on my bike, and I can change the gears, and I can redo the chain and redo everything. And what I realized is like that's really hard. One, if you don't have the tools. Two, if you're trying it for the first time. And I went to a bike guy. He said, "Oh yeah, this is going to be a real like pain. You have to do it yourself." And he did it brilliantly, and he got it back to me in like 45 minutes. And I'm thinking, I just want to be a person that can like have some expertise in some area that can like, be of help and like solve these key issues. And I just always respect anyone who, is from like someone who can fix bikes to someone, who's either a physician or someone's working on like some advanced products. It doesn't matter. If you are very helpful and skilled in some way, I have respect for you. Now, you asked me for one person, and I think that person would be, and this one's probably too easy, like my grandfather. He was always like very good at being disciplined, much more than I was, much more than I know anyone was. He was like someone who had like a very strict routine. And to me, I thought, oh, this must be incredibly boring. Like you're doing the same thing day in, day out. He's like, this isn't boring at all. This is what I want to do. This is like, I'm doing everything that I want to, basically is what he told me. So I just envied that. I was like, wow, like that takes some extreme discipline to, wake up that early. He would like exercise, he would like prepare for work. And mind you, at the time, he was like in his late 70s. So I think he's someone, in my life that I'll just always admire and just have respect for.
Yeah, that's great. What do you imagine some people admire about you?
I would think it is my ability to appear relaxed. Because people say, oh, you're laid back or relaxed. And, I don't always feel that way, but at least I appear that way. But yeah, I think that's it. Like doing that, kind of exercise that I mentioned earlier. I think for most things, I try not to let them bother me. So I'm generally, if things are as they normally are, then I'm a pretty relaxed person. I'm not too wound up.
Yeah. How about something you actually believe about yourself?
What do I believe about myself?
As far as something that you think you believe other people have identified about you and think that's pretty cool. And if you allow yourself to embrace that, you're like, yeah, that is pretty cool.
I would say, I think I've been pretty successful in my career. So I think that would be one. Yeah. I think I've made good choices, had like great bosses. I've had like a good network. And I think I made the right decisions at the right times. And I think that's what helped get me here. And many of those are hard decisions. So I think in that series of decisions, got me to a good point. And I think people would look at me and say, oh, yes, I'm successful in my profession.
So we've reached the point in the conversation where we half jokingly said that people will likely tune off because it's around that time. Do you have anything you'd like to share that will leave people remembering, hey, that was pretty awesome? No pressure.
No, don't remember me. This wasn't that interesting. You could have been doing something much better with your time. No, I'm just joking. I think what I'd want to leave people is that about me. I think probably everything I mentioned was pretty personal, based on experience, and it just doesn't work for everyone. And I've worked on this myself. Like, what are ways that you can kind of help yourself make decisions, reduce stress, etc. And a lot of it is just, I feel, not generalizable. It's like kind of tailor-made to me and my life and my experience. So I think, being like a scientist on yourself and figuring out, what your patterns are, et cetera, and kind of learning from yourself, and not in a limiting way, but knowing what situations you'd like to put yourself into and what would make you happy ultimately. I think you already know a lot about yourself. You just kind of need to access that. And I think that, for me is something I've worked on. I continue to work on. So hoping that could be, of use to people.
Well said. I want to thank you for waking up extra early on the West Coast.
That's true.
To share this time with me.
Now, is any of this usable?
Probably not. So I appreciate it all the more.
I still get that honoraria, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, you'll have to check the show notes for that one. But I do genuinely appreciate it, and look forward to, obviously, the next of many more conversations with you.
Absolutely.
This has been Intentionally Ever After, hosted by intentional lifestyle coach Joe Bukartek. If you would like to have your own intentional conversation with Joe on or off the air, visit intentionallyeverafter.com. Thanks for listening.